Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. So I was listening to leftists online, on YouTube and on some podcasts, and just trying to gauge what it is they think, trying to understand their mindset on certain issues. And I realized that they don't comprehend what they themselves are saying. And so this became clear when I was listening to one in particular, and when trying to describe their political views. They call themselves a libertarian socialist. Libertarian socialist. These are not two words that go together, as they are polar opposites, just like Joe Biden, intelligence. These are two words that do not go together. So in trying to describe their political views, they say libertarian, which libertarian means the smallest possible government. So small, you barely notice them in any aspect of your life. A government that pretty much just does the bare minimum. And socialist, which by definition means one of the largest possible governments possible, with control over every aspect of your life. So he's like, I want the smallest possible government with complete control over every aspect of my life. That's my views. These are two things that do not go together. Which, when you realize this and you take a look at the left, you realize that nothing that they say or claim to believe makes any actual sense. There's no logic behind it. They just spew out words and then hope that you don't notice. Okay, so enough about that. Now, if you've been keeping up here, and yes, we'll get to the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff here in just a moment, but if you've been keeping up, CNN did a hit piece. But this time, it was against the Democrats, which is kind of one of those things where we on the right, we're used to these disingenuous hit pieces, especially from CNN, which has been running fake news and fake rumor and spreading rumors all over the place. But the fact that they did it to the Democrats is interesting. Now, they did it against Joe Biden and talking about the growing distance between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, I realize it's different to see the left go after the left like this, but when you take a look at it, Joe Biden is an old white male. Kamala Harris is, a person of color, a woman of color. So they want to get Joe Biden out of the way so that they can have the first woman of color president. And so they're now starting to turn on Joe because they're going to try and pressure him to get out of the way to make room for Kamala Harris, because the hit piece, while talking about the distance and, the frustration, the dysfunction, and the inner turmoil, was trying to write the piece very favorable to Kamala Harris and trying to explain her low approval numbers. So, of course, they're going to go after Joe Biden because he's at the very bottom of their hierarchy and trying to pave the way for Kamala Harris. Now, after this hit piece came out by CNN, other left-wing media outlets tried to downplay this, and here's them trying to downplay it and what it sounds like.
So first off, let's put this in perspective. How unusual are reports of problems between the president's and vice president's offices?
Not unusual at all. It's as normal as a West Wing storyline.
Nothing unusual about it whatsoever. Now, during the times of Donald Trump and Mike Pence, if there was any sign of disagreement where they weren't on the same page, oh, this is complete chaos, this is complete dysfunction, this is abnormal. But then when they go off and talk about the disagreements and the kind of resentments between a Democrat president and vice president, oh, it's normal. There's nothing unusual about this in any way, shape, or form. So you kind of see how they play both sides. Whether it's normal or abnormal depends on who's in the White House. So we see them trying to downplay it on other news networks. But there is one problem with them trying to downplay it, is that the growing distance, the resentment, the, dissing of each other was really quite evident recently. And so if you're going off and you see CNN come out with a hit piece about the dysfunction and everything, and you got your other media allies out there trying to downplay it, you probably don't want a big screw up like this. And I got to tell you, when I watch this, after seeing the media trying to downplay the the resentment growing in the White House, I had to just laugh. So here it is. So remember, CNN is talking about the growing, conflict within the White House between the president and the vice president. Other media outlets are trying to downplay it, say there's nothing unusual, and then this happens.
Please welcome Heather Kurtenbach.
In a moment. Please have a seat.
So you get where I'm going with this. So CNN, there's a lot of inner turmoil, and the vice president feels alienated and being insulted by the president. There's growing tension. Other media outlets, no, there's not. They do an event together. Kamala Harris clearly taking the podium, and someone else is introduced like, yeah, we see the vice president out there. Could you please kind of move out of the way so we can get to the person we really want to hear from? The left. Funny stuff. All right, so there's another issue that is going on here. So the left wants to be able to go out there and start claiming that, hey, we're the party of solutions. We know how to fix the problems. The problem with that is that they do know what the solution is. It's Trump policies. So they're trying to figure out a way to go through and promote Trump policies without acknowledging that they're following Trump's policies on certain stuff, or, not within the White House, not within the Democrat, elected members, but, analysts, Democrat analysts and all of that. They want to go off and say, hey, we kind of need to, if we want to win elections, we need to have solutions. What really worked was Trump policies. Now, can we find a way to pass off Trump policies as our own? Now, of course, those in the White House, Joe Biden, and those in the House and the Senate, Democrats, they're never going to go along with this because they're never wanting to set up a situation where they acknowledge that Trump policies actually worked. But when you go off and you take a look at, here's what the solutions are. And when they actually talk about a real solution, they're talking about things that President Trump did while he was in office. So go ahead and take a look. Listen to what the guy is saying about China, how it is we need to deal with China, and then see if it sounds familiar to you.
What do you see as, what this meeting really was in the end?
Well, this meeting was to establish the guardrails, as they said, but we have tried this approach. We've had intensive diplomacy with China for 3 decades, and Chinese behavior has only gotten worse. So I think that we need to go beyond guardrails and start imposing costs on behavior which is not only acceptable, but in some cases is malicious. So there needs to be a rethinking of the assumptions that have driven U.S.-China relations.
So in other words, Trump policies. So he's going off and admitting that Joe Biden is trying to reenact the failed policies of Obama. And then he's saying, well, we need to go beyond guardrails and make sure that there are severe punishments if China does something bad, which is what Trump did and was able to kind of tamp down on China's abuses and, military aspirations. And so they're basically saying, yeah, Joe Biden's trying to do the failed policies of Obama. We need to go beyond that and show that there are real consequences, which is what Trump did. But he's trying to leave Trump out of the equation here, because if they go off and admit that Trump policies worked, well, they'll be attacked, they'll be canceled. And plus, going off and admitting to the American people that Trump's policies actually did a better job because they weren't complete failures like Democrat policies, it wouldn't look good for the midterms, which are already looking to be completely disastrous for the Democrat Party. All right, so now let's go ahead and get into the Rittenhouse stuff here, because as you know, at least at the time of this recording, the jury is still in deliberation. Now, people are getting nervous about, hey, what's taking so long? And they're like, well, the evidence shows that Rittenhouse is innocent, but you got the mob threatening them and chanting and yelling so loud that you can hear them inside the courthouse. And so now they're kind of scared, because if they go along with the evidence and say he's not guilty, well, what does that mean? What kind of riots, how many more neighborhoods are going to be burnt down as a result? It's mob justice, just like we saw in Derek Chauvin, where when the mob shows up and threatens the jury and threatens the city, either you find them guilty regardless of the evidence, or we're going to burn down your communities and we're coming after you, the jury. And so we take a look at this. We also see here that maybe they just want to, analyze every last bit to ensure that they come to the correct decision. And so they got the jury instructions for the first 6 pages. They went through that, and then later on in the day, they wanted the copies of the rest of the instructions from the judge so that they can go through. So they're kind of going through, debating one by one all of the charges, and maybe taking a vote after each debate to determine which charges, are not guilty, which charges guilty, which I'm sure what they are trying to do is going, okay, we got a mob threatening our community and probably threatening us if we do not find him guilty. But taking a look at this, if we find them not guilty, which is going to result in them burning down our community, we need to make sure that we are absolutely 100% right and can justify our decision. Because there is no way with the evidence presented to them that they can legitimately come to a guilty verdict. So if they do end up trying to find guilty, or maybe they're trying to look through there and find the most minor thing that they can think of to find him guilty, hoping to appease the mob. Or maybe, you got some mothers in there going, if this was my child, I wouldn't want a jury sacrificing my child to satisfy a mob. So maybe you got some of that stuff that is going on. But when you see what's going on outside the courthouse, you understand that the mob, they don't care about what the evidence showed. They don't care about witness testimony. They say no justice, no peace, but they don't believe in justice in any way, shape, or form. It becomes quite evident that what they are trying to push for here is a situation where they can attack you. And by the way, when it comes to the prosecutor saying he could have fought back fist to fist, yeah, there's plenty of videos of people who tried that and got decimated by the mob because it was a 10-on-1 attack. So in any event, you see them chanting, no justice, no peace, but they don't believe in justice. What they're trying to get to a situation where they can come into your community, attack anybody that they want who looks like, they wouldn't agree with their political views, burn down the community, and anybody who tries to defend themselves or their community from acts of domestic terrorism, well, that's not allowed. You're not allowed to defend yourself. When we attack, you have to accept the beating. That's the message that we get here. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of people, because there is a scale here between the complete off the rails, nut jobs who have no concern for actual justice, that just want to set up mob rule, and other people who are not quite as bad, but it shows that they have no understanding of self-defense, no understanding of the legal system, and they're trying to, rationalize the evidence versus what they want. So when we talk about the school system and ideological subversion, it's in degrees. The effectiveness of the brainwashing is at various degrees. It's not 100% complete on everyone. So let's go ahead and take a look at this video from the Daily Wire about what's going on outside of the courthouse in the Kyle Rittenhouse case.
You all have made this plan political with your own personal beliefs.
This is a case where two unarmed men who were bravely going out in the street to protest Jacob Blake getting shot they were dispersed, right? They got pepper sprayed, rubber bullets and whatnot. So, and then turned into rioting, and then Kyle felt the need to take things in his own hands. It's like going to a buffet with a fork and saying you're not ready to eat. You know what I mean? If he had a handgun, could have been self-defense. Like, you know how menacing you look walking down the street during a riot? Assault rifle? Innocent or guilty? If he's guilty, he goes to prison. If he's innocent, he goes free. What will he do with this new opportunity? You know what I mean? He did the wrong thing. He learned from his mistake, right? How about we do something else instead of riot? How about we organize something so we can be heard, so they be forced to listen to us?
Okay, so you have two different views there. You have the one guy, a complete nut job, wearing America was never great shirt. He's not paying attention to any of the evidence or facts. He goes off and he spews, about Jacob Blake. And of course, he doesn't provide any actual facts. It shows that he's completely ignorant about any of the details of that situation. But he's going off here and basically wanting to set up mob rule and just basically trying to claim that if Kyle Rittenhouse gets found not guilty, it's a green light to white supremacy, which just goes to show he knows nothing. The brainwashing of that guy is so complete, he just only knows how to regurgitate what he's told to think. Regurgitate what his masters tell him he needs to believe. I mean, it's really quite amazing. No details, but he's going to go off and spew a bunch of opinions in which he knows nothing about the situation in which he's given an opinion about. And of course, to him, it doesn't matter if Rittenhouse is guilty or not guilty. Whether it was self-defense, it doesn't matter. If the left attacks you, your only option is to take the beating. Because he wants to be on the side that can just pound anybody for expressing any views that they disagree with. And of course, it's white supremacy. It's always white supremacy. And it's like, okay, you got if you take a look at the case here, you got a white guy on trial for shooting 3 white people. How they make this about race, I don't know. But they're going off, well, it's because it was a Black Lives Matter protest, which there was a lot of white people there. And they were protesting Jacob Blake. So they all go through and say, well, he shot people who were, protesting. That wasn't a protest. It was a full-on riot. It was acts of domestic terrorism. There is no way, shape, or form in which you can claim that people going out, smashing windows, looting stores, and setting everything on fire is anything short of a riot. How they go off and they try to claim it's a protest, I don't know. So that guy is a complete nut job. Now, the other guy, the black guy, I don't know what his name is, but he's going off. He's admitting he doesn't really know about the Jacob Blake situation. So that's a good start, admitting what he doesn't know. But then he goes off and he starts talking about, the trial, and, he seems like he's kind of on the fence as far as guilty, not guilty. But there was one thing that he said here that kind of gets off. So the weapon that you have is what I get out of his argument. The weapon that you have is what determines whether it was self-defense or not. Not the actions, not whether you were being attacked, and had to defend yourself. No, and he makes that clear when he goes, well, if it was a handgun, yeah, it would be self-defense. But because it was a AR-15, and the gun looked menacing, that's not self-defense. And I guess part of the argument by extension is that if people see your gun, and that you have to defend yourself, and they don't like the way it looks, well, then you are provocative, right? You are provoking them to violence, which, even though what you're doing is exercising your Second Amendment rights, which is to keep and bear arms, but now they're trying to go off and make a distinction where, okay, if all else was the same, and the only difference in the situation was he had a handgun instead of an AR-15, that's self-defense. But because it was an AR-15 instead of a handgun, well, then that's obviously not self-defense. So, you see there's a very sliding scale of how much the indoctrination and the brainwashing has been completed on people. Some of them still have the capacity for rational thought, but they're still going off and making things and stating things that make absolutely no sense. handgun versus rifle. That's not what determines self-defense. It's, were you being attacked? And did you have fear that the attacker could cause severe bodily injury or death to you? That's the standard. Not, what type of gun did you have? Okay, this gun means self-defense. This gun means not self-defense. That's not how this works. But you can see here, everyone trying to give an uneducated opinion, not going off and researching things. You know, I mean, he was more intelligent and seemed like he was more capable of thought than the other guy who was white. But, you know, his thought process is incomplete. He's missing some information. You know, and I have a feeling that he may get most of his information from left-wing propagandists. But at least he still has the capability of rational thought. But I want to end this on a high note, but he does go off at the very end and go, yeah, regardless of how this turns out, no rioting. You know, he's acknowledging that, you know, rioting, and I have no idea if he participated in any way, shape, or form in the last riot. I have no information on that. So I'm going to assume that he didn't. But he's probably going off and looking at all the riots that had happened, not just in Kenosha, but around the country, and saying, hey, this isn't doing anything. This isn't getting us heard. This isn't getting us towards any objective. In fact, all we're doing is destroying our own communities and hurting ourselves. You know, and so he's going off and, you know, and I praise him for this, talking about how rioting, violence is not the answer. That's not going to get to the solution, and that they need to engage in different activities that are likely, you know, to get them heard, you know, in a positive way that can bring people to the table and discuss the issues. Now, does that mean, you know, we're going to agree on everything? No, but according to the left, the reason why they engage in violence is because they just want you to submit to everything that they want. It's their way or the highway. And if you pick the highway, they're going to burn the damn thing down. So, I mean, that's kind of the pressure that everyone's facing inside of that jury room, hearing all the noise and the commotions, especially people on the megaphone shouting in, basically convict them or we're going to burn down your community again. But I wanted to provide from that video someone who is just completely off the rail lunatic, has no information, but is ready and willing to engage in violence because he's told that's what to do, because he's told that's what to think, and that anything short of that, you know, anything short of guilty is a green light to white supremacy terrorists. Really? Was it white supremacist terrorists that was burning down the entire community last year? No. All right. So one last thing here. So there was a hearing up on Capitol Hill. Yes, there's always, hearings on this subject and that subject. And this one deals with the Biden administration and illegal immigration and the proposed payment to those who were separated at the border. And the guy who is responding is a complete sleazeball. You know, he's going off and trying to dodge some questions a little bit, trying to go, oh, I don't have the information really on that, but then tries to go off and insult the previous administration's policies, and he kind of starts getting called out on it, and he's trying to engage in doublespeak to basically say, well, when Donald Trump did it, it was horrible, but when we do it, it's okay. So here's what that sounded like.
Because I know that the cases that are before the Department of Justice to which you are referring are Federal Tort Claims Act, where not all of those unlawfully present are filing suit against the government, but those parents whose children were taken from them as a means of deterring irregular migration, the part of the zero tolerance policy of the prior administration, the family separation policy that received bipartisan condemnation, and quite frankly, the condemnation of the American public. What is an appropriate outcome of that litigation in response to the family separation policy, the cruel policy, is something I cannot opine on.
Well, since you called the policy cruel, let me ask you this. During the Biden administration, has the Department of Homeland Security ever separated a single illegal alien from someone they claim as their child?
Yes, but not as part of the zero tolerance policy, not as part of the family separation policy that was so cruel.
You were the deputy secretary during the Obama administration. Did the Department of Homeland Security ever separate a single illegal alien from someone they claimed that was their child in the Obama administration?
Neither in the Biden administration nor in the Obama administration did we execute the zero tolerance policy that the Trump administration promulgated and cruelly enforced.
Well, I'd say the policies you've been implementing are complete tolerance for illegal migrants crossing our border.
What a complete sleazeball. So let me clear the record here and anybody who's done any research understands this. The whole family separation, that was not a policy that Trump implemented. That was implemented by the courts back in the late 90s, right? Where the court said, well, you can't detain minors in the same facilities that you detain adults who have been captured breaking our laws, crossing the borders illegally. So it was the courts that implemented the whole, if you are detaining the parents, you can't hold the children in the same facilities. And so this policy or this child separation of, separating children from the illegal, from the parents who illegally crossed over into the country, that was something that was happening in the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. But when it happened in Trump's administration, they're like, oh, this is cruel. This is family separation. He implemented that. He didn't implement it. The only thing that changed between, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump is that Trump's zero tolerance policy was that we have zero tolerance for people crossing the border illegally. Meaning that whether they had a child or didn't have a child, they would, if they just crossed the border illegally, they're going to be detained. And just the act of detainment by order of the court meant that the kids had to go to a separate facility than where their parents were held. So it wasn't a cruel policy by the Trump administration. Trump's administration's policy was, we're going to enforce the law. And we're going to follow the courts and the court orders. That was it. That was, and somehow that is cruel. But when Obama did it, oh, no. That wasn't cruel because it wasn't part of a zero tolerance policy. Well, did you have to separate kids from their parents on anybody you detained? Yeah. We did that, which is exactly what Trump did. But it wasn't cruel when we did it because we weren't enacting zero tolerance for people crossing the border illegally. So basically what you're saying here is it wasn't as cruel when you did it because you were not fully enforcing the laws that were on the books because you didn't want to follow the court order. So the difference between cruel and uncruel is Trump enforced the laws on everybody equally, and the Obama administration and now the Biden administration is picking and choosing who to enforce the law on. And that's the difference between cruel and uncruel, according to them. So basically saying, yeah, we did it. But we think, it was okay. Trump does the exact same thing and it's cruel. Now that Trump's out of office, we're still doing that. But it's okay because we're Democrats. That is the entire narrative. And he's trying to go off and say this and hope nobody notices that what he's saying is, Trump's policy was only that the laws were going to be enforced on everybody, not selectively. I mean, hopefully you understand that. Hopefully you get that. Hopefully you understand that the difference between, according to them, cruel and humane is the difference between enforcing the law equally and enforcing the law selectively, where they are saying they're humane because it's selectively enforced. Trump's zero tolerance was only the law enforced on everyone the same. Zero tolerance for anybody crossing the border. Now, I do like there at the end, it's like, yeah, your policy seems to be tolerance for everybody. Let everyone break the law. Let anybody cross over from around the world with no vetting, no checks. It's open borders to the entire planet, which is not sustainable for us. Everyone comes in and then, from around the world, and we're supposed to just give them everything that they want. Government benefits, government payments, everything. Anyways, that's it for this particular episode. I know it was a slow news day the other day, but these were some of the highlights of the things that were going on. Now we're waiting for the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Likely, depending on when the verdict comes out, if there is one today, I might be able to make another video, or depending on how late it is, I might wait until tomorrow. I'm sure you're going to be there watching the moment the verdict is announced. And so we'll go through and we'll analyze the verdict and what it means. All right. So in the meantime, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and leave me some comments. If you're listening to the audio version of the show, leave me a rating and review. And of course, share this around anywhere free speech is allowed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be back again soon.